No. Bom dia às pessoas já presentes, sejam bem-vindos. Vamos só dar aqui mais uns minutinhos para as pessoas que ainda se estão a juntar e de seguida começamos o webinar. Obrigado. And I should will give just a couple more minutes and we will start. Okay, I think we can start and then people will be joining along the way. Então, bom dia a todos, mais uma vez, sejam bem-vindos a esta sessão de Quest Foglight, em conjunto com a Quest. Temos aqui o nosso que nos vai ajudar a apresentar a solução e dar aqui um overview. Tem aqui no slide os tópicos que vão ser cobertos. Tem aqui o meu contacto para depois do webinar, se tiverem alguma dúvida, alguma questão que precisem de ser esclarecida, podem contactar e necessário podemos contactar em conjunto também a Quest. Por isso, I just did my small introduction. Please go ahead with your presentation and thank you for your help in this session. So thank you and go ahead.
For joining in. So what I'll do is I'm just going to share my screen quickly. So Ricardo, if you can just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen there.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you all for joining. My name is Naushad Sheikh, as Ricardo mentioned. I'm the technical consultant for Quest. And primarily, I support the database products, the infrastructure, the cloud aspects, and things like that. So in today's presentation, what we will try and do is we'll look at what is Foglight. We'll understand the overviews, what platforms we currently support within the Foglight area. And then we will talk about how Foglight helps database performance, improves features with rich capabilities and those kind of things. And then also what we'll also do is we'll go into the areas of how does Foglight solve your database problems, your infrastructure problems by using SQL Performance Investigator. And then we'll also dive into the Foglight hybrid cloud infrastructure where Foglight provides you a lot of good stuff. For technical people, for infrastructure people, I also put some slides across around general architecture, and then most of these I correlate in many slides, especially the use cases of databases and infrastructure monitoring. So with that, the very first slide, what is Foglight? So Foglight is an enterprise product. So there are two sides of Foglight. Foglight for databases, which primarily supports all the various different kinds of databases that we currently have. We support right now 13 different types of databases, which I'll talk about it in the upcoming slide, right from SQL Server all the way to Amazon databases, Azure databases, and things like that. So, and in addition to that, we also have Foglight Evolve, which is basically this pretty much the same product. So I would say it's a combination. So basically, Foglight as an infrastructure product, which we call it as Evolve. For databases, we call that as cross-platform databases product. So in the infrastructure side, we currently support from the standard physical infrastructure, anything you name from Windows, Unix, Linux, AIX, HPUX, those kind of machines, to VMware, Hyper-V, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and also IBM Cloud to that extent. We also currently have a support for Kubernetes, Dockers, and then a very widespread across vCloud, VMware, Cloud on AWS, Citrix, Office 365, Exchange, Active Directory. So a lot of monitoring aspects there, a lot of variations around how Foglight can be very helpful in your organizations. So in addition to standard monitoring, Foglight comes with some added benefits, things like resource optimization, cost and budget management, if you need to do some capacity and planning management around your systems, and remediated actions, optimization, and a lot of things in combination with database tuning. And then there's lots of reporting as well. How about looking at those kind of aspects and kind of like making that happen for your organizations, where you have multiple teams from DevOps, database operations, and things like that. So very unique features all around that. So then with the monitoring tool, so what do you actually are benefiting from? I mean, as a goal for you to look at, we have Foglight. Now we are currently monitoring databases, infrastructure. So basically the goal for us is to help you solve all database problems, anything that is on IaaS or infrastructure, performance, platform as a service. It also very nicely does an database dependency on infrastructure components. How do you quickly find your root causes? How do you accelerate your resolution? And also eliminating those multiple product related issues. So with that, let's take a quick glance. How does Foglight look like as an enterprise database toolset? So this is just a quick overview screen that I'd like to bring in and show you what it means to have under one single enterprise product to monitor all types of databases. I mean, today's organization, it just does not have just a SQL Server alone or just Oracle alone. They have combinations of databases, MySQL and Postgres and all of that. So how about having all of those databases monitored? Likewise, how about having hybrid infrastructure where you can have a full-fledged monitoring around Azure, AWS, Cloud, and also have capacity director, look at consolidations or container management and things like that. And at the same time, looking at performance-related stuff, look at top CPU consumers or networks or memories or storage, things like that from cloud perspective, as well as the physical infrastructure. Now, with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like you to introduce you to a concept called performance investigator. Now, within the database monitoring space, what we have is one of the key products, which is called Performance Investigator. Performance Investigator is very crucial for a database administrator to look at aspects from data analysis. It gives you intelligent data insights where we provide metrics from multi-dimensional aspect. So what do we currently support? We give you information on Azure SQL, Azure Managed Instance, Azure databases, and SQL Server, plus Oracle and MySQL. We are planning to introduce the Performance Investigator to Postgres. which basically helps you to look at problems from a historical data perspective. Let's say, for example, there was a SQL issue and or maybe a T-SQL batch. If it is an Oracle, maybe you have an issue with PL SQL, things like that. One of the key benefits of having Performance Investigator, it supports all versions of databases. One, two, if you are an Oracle house, you don't need to have Oracle Enterprise license. So basically, we do not touch any enterprise licensing there. That's one of the key things that you have to take that as a main concern. Like many customers come and ask us, like, well, we have Oracle Standard Editions. Can we use Performance Investigator? Yes, you can, because Quest provides you the capability to look at data from multi-dimensional aspect, and where you can look at historical data, fine-tune those things. Like, for example, if you wanted to look at analyze, optimize, execution plan analysis, those kind of things can also be done. You can look at identifying and anticipating performance issues. How about comparing data and looking at anomalies and application changes over a period of time? This could be with at the highest level, or it could be at SQL level, it could be at database level, it could be a user level or client machine level. So quite nice stuff around these areas. Now, we'll also talk about some added benefits with Performance Investigator. One, Foglight provides you with advisories. Basically, the purpose of having these advisories is to, it automatically comes back and gives you those relevant and important information on how do you solve your performance issues, where Foglight can advise you and give you recommendation, and where you can actually take those steps. Comparison, as I mentioned in my previous slide, look at specific new activities within your server. What is responsible for that performance change? And then look at activity highlights. We call that as activity highlights, or you can look at performance highlights, where you can actually filter those information and look at server load data, analyze from different angles, and then change tracking. I mean, there's an aspect of looking at database performance, right? I mean, how about looking at infrastructure at the same time, or changes that are happening behind the scenes? Maybe there are database object changes, there is explained plan changes, or maybe there is system configuration changes. We capture all of those various different elements in this particular dashboard, which is called change tracking. Now, I thought I'll introduce you first to the basics of what is Foglight. We'll talk about what is hybrid infrastructure, and then we'll also talk about how do you actually drive those elements there. But before that, I mean, one of the key things that you need to understand is, why is it important for me as of today? One of the key things that I'd like to highlight is, we talk a lot about data. We talk a lot about looking at information from various different aspects. So one of the key things that when I speak to my customers or when I speak to different partners, we always talk about data. Data is growing fast. We are seeing lots of databases. Information is very diverse, and it is leading to complexity, right? I mean, one of the key things is with more data, more complexity. So how do we handle those? To take one thing at a time, like, you know, just look at the data silos that we have. I mean, we have, even in my company at Quest, we have SQL Server teams. We have specialists in MySQL, or maybe we have a lot of SQL servers or a lot of Oracle databases with Oracle financials and things like that. Now, what happens with that is we have database sprawl. We're looking at siloed data, where we want to integrate all of those systems together and have data access, and at the same time you're preparing the data so that you can improve the benefits from looking at one tool, which is kind of like enterprise at the same time. Maybe as a company, you're managing one to many different types of databases. We're looking at resource constraints. I mean, you may be looking at flat budgets. Maybe you have limited resources, skill gaps, and also maybe doing projects simultaneously, building infrastructure, building applications, making code changes, things you actually help improve those aspects by utilizing the benefits of having the Foglight as an enterprise product. As we said, I mean, with more data adds the complexity. So what kind of data complexity you have, as we discussed? I mean, today you may have SQL, you may have Oracle, And then the complexity of cloud is adding in as well. Like maybe, you plan to move some of your databases to Azure, some of your databases to AWS, or maybe Google Cloud, or maybe Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So having those multiple database types and having some unstructured data with cloud coming into play. And then we are talking about a lot of virtualization because we have a system. So how do we actually bring that together in form of reducing that data complexity, reducing those constraints, and reducing those data silos? Added to that complexity is how can you keep your business and IT agility to maintain those SLAs, looking at time to data insights. Look at if you have database operation teams, you may be having DevOps where you're looking at code. Maybe you're sending some of you're improving your code using Jira or Altition products or things like that. And you have distributed teams. So how about bringing all of those together into one single platform where you're looking at databases from multiple angles? At the same time, you're also ensuring your systems are working efficiently. So why does it matter, right? I mean, I would say why IT matters, right? So let's take a look at one of our case studies and one of our recent customers who purchased Foglight, who thinks how it is actually benefiting them. So I'd like to take an example of Swiss Post. The Swiss Post is a very recent customer from Switzerland. One of the main needs is they had multiple database environments like SQL, Oracle, and all of those kind of things. And the key problem they had was how do I become intelligent as a database guy, not only to look at SQL Server, not only to look at Oracle, but get some intelligent insights and data. So they wanted to have something like performance investigator, SQL performance investigator. Security concerns like having multiple tools, bringing in data from multiple resources became a security concern. So they wanted to have teams that looked into how secure a tool can be. Can we have an enterprise tool? Can we self-service performance issues and do those analysis? So how did Foglight help them? How did Quest help them? How did our partners help them in resolving those issues? Is to bring in modularity, right? I mean, initially they decided to go with SQL Server, Oracle, and then they added on database tool sets like monitoring for MySQL, Postgres, and so on. Usability was key because there was less learning curve. Security was a concern. We resolved that by having the systems integrated with LDAP, Active Directory configuration. So it was a collaborative effort, and the responsiveness from the team was quite efficient, and they were able to solve problems quite early. So talking about those, I mean, when you're analyzing a problem, I mean, this is something that came up from a database operations guy. He says that with Foglight, they can bring all the data together and compare and look at baselines and also historical analysis as well. So I just wanted to put this across there so that you kind of like understand and take this with you as a thought, like how Foglight is helping businesses across around the world. Now, just for you to think from various different aspects, what I've done is I've put down a slide called Why Foglight, again, to think about it. And think about from your angle, your perspective. It could be you want to reduce costs. I mean, you want to keep your savings. You may have some consolidations around your infrastructure. It could be SQL Server consolidation. Maybe you are moving away from 2005 onwards. All your systems are being decommissioned. You want to eliminate that downtime. You want to ensure that you're optimizing your hardware and improve that system. And then maybe you have a very large monitoring estate. I mean, I've seen customers where they have, say, about 10 SQL Server databases or 10 Oracle databases or any types of databases, right? But we also see a lot of customers like banking customers or customers from government sectors. They have very large database estate, and they have dev systems, they have production systems. How do you combine those and where you can have a single enterprise server to look at those things, issue resolution, identification, and also at the same time reduce your downtime on those production servers where you have criticalities and things like that. At the same time, we talk a lot about tuning and optimization. So with the tuning and optimization, we talk quite heavily about performance issues, improvements, how you can actually improve the SQL, how you can actually improve your database operation, and then bridging the skills gap. I mean, how do you actually bridge the skill gap? Like, for example, my role in my initial years, I was an Oracle DBA, and then I had to pick up SQL Server. I had to learn Postgres. I have to do MySQL. So basically, what happened was with multi-tools, it's like, for example, I use a lot of Toad, I use a lot of Foglight, where I integrate my knowledge together to understand the concepts quite fast. So basically, with having the tools, it adds an added advantage where you can actually reduce your skill gaps, and at the same time, you can help improve your ability to perform better going forward. So just for you to think, what are the key areas that you can actually look at, and how you can actually look at cost savings. If you have a large estate or a small estate, it does not matter. Look at the options of tuning and optimization, and also look at, do I need to train my team? How quickly can how quickly my team can learn with the product quite easily. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Foglight for databases, which is one of the primary products that we have. And I will go through some of the main features after this slide. And then we will also talk about some of the use cases that has been beneficial and will be beneficial for you as a customer. So just to introduce you to Foglight, there are three main areas for Foglight for databases that you need to look at. We have something called alerting and notification. With Foglight's engine, one of the key things that you need to know is the data that it collects, it constantly evaluates the data. It looks at baselining. So that means when a system deviates from a particular baseline, you get an alert saying that your system has moved up the CPU, or the SQL performance has gone low, high, and things around those. How about looking at robust alarm management, which I'll show you in another slide shortly, where you can actually create your own groups, you can create your own thresholds, you can do direct notifications, you can integrate with third-party tools. When we say third-party tools, it could be, for example, it could be starting from simple tools like Microsoft Teams. You can integrate with Slack, you can integrate with ServiceNow. If you have products like Jira, Ops Genie, for example, so you can very easily integrate with third-party products using REST API. Now, as I mentioned, we also have something called SQL Performance Investigator, which is basically how do you actually look at root cause analysis, deep dive, which I previously mentioned. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but this is just for you to give you an indication and remind you what we have in terms of root cause analysis, where you can actually take 3 simple steps to look at the problem and start working on the problem by investigating, by looking at the SQL Performance Investigator. Then there's a lot of data analytics on every single dashboard in Foglight. That every number, every graph is a representation of a trend, a representation of a baseline, representation of inventory management, and you can also do capacity management around that. Now, what do we support in Foglight for databases? I mean, we support currently 13 different types of databases. I mean, you have Oracle, DB2, Amazon Redis, SQL Server, SAP AAC, which was Sybase previously, Azure SQL databases, both Elastic and SingleDB we support, MySQL, all versions of MySQLs, whether it is on physical infrastructure, whether it is on Azure, whether it's on Google Cloud or AWS as a platform as a service databases, we support that. Likewise, MongoDB, Cassandra, and Postgres. Snowflake has recently been added, SAP HANA, and Amazon Redshift. So lots of good flavors around there for you to look at from an aspect. So for example, if you were a customer where you have legacy systems on DB2 running on AIX, so we do have support for that. If you have SQL Server running 2005, very old systems, but you still need monitoring, we support that. Likewise, if you have Oracle 10G, we support 10G with multidimensional aspects as well. So just a thought around that, and what I'd like to do is give you that concept of understanding what it means to have mean time to resolution. How do you speed up that mean time to resolution? Well, with Foglight, there is something called automatic dependency. That means when you purchase a license, when you connect and start collecting data, you can very easily integrate with infrastructures like VMware, where you can look at the problematic areas from multiple angles. So, for example, if you're monitoring a database system here, if the data store is seated on a particular vCenter or maybe a particular data store, it automatically interlinks and tells you where the problem is. So basically, it could be a problem related to SQL Server, or maybe a problem related to data store. It could be an IO related stuff where you can actually map the data, look at modules in a service, look at infrastructure, look at storage and network at the same time. So basically, there is automatic dependency service mapping in that in this particular case. Now, I'm going to take you a little bit further. I'll deep dive into some of the use cases and benefits that you get with Foglight. Now, one of the key things is, do I have visibility of, on over the entire database enterprise database environment? Yes, you do. As a single pane of glass with multiple drill downs. Each number there represents a drill down. It could be fatal alarms. It could be critical alarms, or a simple heat map where you can actually dive into those specifics and very quickly identify what the problem is. Now let's look at how do we integrate with the database to infrastructure layer. So when you configure a system, so obviously we have anything from SQL Server to Oracle, or Azure, or MySQL or Postgres. If you have an on-prem server where like an IaaS instance, we connect the host metrics with it. So basically there's an interlink to the host. We collect the host metrics as well. At the same time, we show you database metrics as well. So visibility from database to infrastructure is available within Foglight, where you can actually pinpoint whether it is a database problem or an infrastructure problem. How about looking and drilling into information from SQL Performance Investigator, where you can actually look at every database. You can drill down to the details by using the database. For example, as you can see on my screen, we have a workload scenario for the systems. You can look at SQL statements. You can look at operating system users, or maybe you want to investigate from machines. So if you drill down into those specifics, you can actually look at complete SQL statements. You can look at the blocking history, what's been blocking from that program perspective, or maybe the script perspective. And at the same time, it very nicely provides you information from what's the resource breakdown, which area your database is causing problems. So here in this case, it is talking about CPU usage. So the idea behind this is how you can actually simplify your system, simplify your investigation, spend less time and quickly identify the resource of the problem, right? I mean, that's the whole idea of having an enterprise tool. And then how about having different database groups in different domains, or whether it is production, non-production, UATs, or dev environments. When you have these kind of environments, what you can do is you can actually group them within Foglight, because Foglight is like a service model. So it automatically creates all the databases into a structure. So for example, if you want to create a model where you want to have all the production servers in one area, you can create modules around maybe you are a multi-vendor, or maybe you have a multi-site customer. So if that's the case, you can actually look at creating maybe it's a set of healthcare systems, or maybe it is it's related to some R&D type of servers, or maybe you have front-end portal application. So you can have various different databases into a particular group and give access to those team members so that they can actually gain advantage of looking just at this particular dashboard. So basically, the idea there is how you can actually quickly group those databases and create different domains whether it is a production server or non-production, it does not matter. You can create alarms, you can create templates quite easily within Foglight. Now, let's talk about database workload optimization. Well, very simple, right? I mean, again, as the key component there with the analytics that we provide within Foglight, how can you actually quickly investigate, find the root cause, and eliminate the problem? I mean, things like, to start from looking at the information from, look at simple SQL text, have a full glance of your SQL text, plan your, look at the plan analysis, look at the execution plans. You can fine tune, which I'll show you in a slide. How, I mean, there is an add-on product which you can use with Foglight, which is called SQL Optimizer. You can also do compare. You can drill into the SQL statement, look at SQL by SQL metrics. And also you can actually simply export this entire table by pressing this CSV button there. And at the same time, you can also view this as a PDF. That means you can extract the data. You can actually generate a report straight off this particular dashboard, just as is from this particular screen. Then, in addition to that, with the SQL Performance Investigator, we also have something called predictive and proactive advisories. As I said, advisories form a very key component within Foglight. For example, if you take SQL Server for an example, we have 19 different types of advisories. So the advisory could be, as you can see on my screen, it is about IO usage deviation. So Foglight will come back and tell you, well, we saw some deviation here. You need to look at some of those aspects and fix those issues. I mean, those kind of nice corrective actions are available in Foglight. So it's just not about one particular area. We cover for the entire database areas. So this is something quite useful for many organizations, especially when you have a database administrator, when you have a junior DBAs, when you have non-DBA teams. But if you needed to understand what is actually Foglight doing, what is it actually collecting, can I solve my problems, those kind of things will heavily help you in order to dive into and start understanding and send this across to your senior DBAs to investigate the problem in a much better fashion. Now, with that, we also talk quite heavily about track your database changes. I mean, when we talk about database changes, every single activity that happens on the database, we pretty much track those changes at multiple levels, at account levels, at database configuration levels, at database object levels, execution levels, system and config levels. So the idea is, if there was a change, Foglight tracks those and it puts a marker around it. So you can look at time-wise what is actually happening around that time, and you can specifically drill down into the specifics, and maybe you can correlate your performance issue with the database changes that are happening behind the scenes. So that is one of the key things that a key feature where you can actually which will actually help you in your environments. Now, there's another key aspect with database is how do you fine tune your SQL, right? Which is very, very important with any database toolset that you have. There is an add-on product which is called SQL Optimizer. It provides optimization for SQLs. It provides optimization for your indexes. You can also rewrite inefficient SQLs, basically. So when Foglight tells you, this is the SQL you need to fine tune, all you have to do is bring that SQL to this particular tool. And then SQL Optimizer is one of the add-on products that we have, which runs iterations, multiple iterations, and comes back and tells you there are 21 faster ways of writing a SQL statement or writing a T-SQL statement, which will help you help your database to perform efficiently. So things like that. And it also provides you an execution plan once it's found the champion SQL or a champion index, so that can be referenced or tested against the database and improve performance on that specific database platform. Okay, so with that, in addition to fine tuning, well, as a traditional DBA myself, what I have is I like to write my own scripts. I like to monitor my own scripts. Well, in Foglight, that's also flexibility. That is basically going beyond data points and also collecting data that I like. For example, I like to see a particular database file size. Maybe I like to see a blocking session which is relevant to an application. So what you can do in Foglight, you can use that script and you can plug it into the Foglight user-defined collections, where you can actually constantly collect data, which will provide you as additional metrics, and also it will provide you information from various different environments that you prefer to collect as part of your custom SQL scripts monitoring as well. Okay. Another nice feature that I'd like to talk about is how about looking at different thresholds for each database type, or maybe you want to send specific alarms to a certain set of team members. Like, for example, if I was a senior DBA, I would like to see all the production alarms and only fatal alarms coming to me. If I was a development team member, I'd like to see anything that comes in from warning to critical because I'm writing code. I want to improve my code. So you can set those targeted dev boxes there, or maybe for production servers, I can set my targets to production. So things like that can be done. And then I can also interlink. If the server is seated on VMware or if the server is seated on cloud, you can create various different templates in order to send those particular key alarms to key set of people. So you can create as many as templates you like in your organization and help set those thresholds, set those databases, set those infrastructures according to your needs, and create your own notification channels. Okay, so this is a brief introduction about Foglight for databases. I'll quickly dive into Foglight Hybrid Cloud Manager, which is another aspect of infrastructure monitoring, where I will talk to you about some of those key elements around how does Foglight can support having the infrastructure capabilities at the same time, and at the same time, how do you reduce, optimize your systems in a much better fashion. So what we see here is on a day-to-day basis, I mean, there is, with the data demand and data growth and complexity, customer challenges and demand that we see is technology is growing. You'd like to keep up with the latest technology in your organization. At the same time, maybe you want to migrate or offload those databases and applications to cloud infrastructure. So what do we need to do? I mean, the first step, obviously, when you monitor your VMware environments, when you monitor your cloud aspects, one of the key things your business asks is, how can I maximize my return on investment on existing resources and avoid future costs? So we have something called within Foglight, there is VMware Hyper-V Citrix monitoring that is available, which will help you to identify and reclaim underutilized resources. You can actually configure the systems. I mean, you can configure the system in such a manner where you can actually provide a cost associated to it, and then come back with potential savings around how do you optimize the systems and reduce the waste before you do a migration, so that you can actually reduce your software license costs or hardware costs. And basically the goal there for you is to how do you reduce your operational expenditure or capital expenditure, depending on the model that you follow. Well, then you can think of a migration plan. So within the Foglight Evolve aspect, we have something called cloud migration. So if you were to migrate to Azure or AWS, you can actually select the workloads. Maybe this is your VMware data center. You can select an Azure cloud model or an AWS cloud model or a GCP, which is Google Cloud Platform. So select your cloud provider, select your region, and apply those parameters or apply those works to those systems, and run a migration preview so that you can actually see how does the cost and the performance effects, and should you move to the cloud if that is the kind of plan you have that you're currently, where you're doing a data transformation or a IT transformation where you want to simplify your systems on-prem to cloud. If that is the kind of situation you have, we can actually help you look at your migration plans, and also at the same time run some models on Foglight, which will give you cost and performance metrics, which will help you to migrate around that. And then how about managing cloud and on-prem costs? Well, because we have something called cost director, there is an aspect called cost director within the product, which basically helps you to look at a holistic view from price plans, where you can actually look at like-to-like comparison to cloud. You can look at cloud spend. You can look at financial modeling. You can also look at what is the license cost and add-ons, especially when you're looking at both the cloud aspects and on-prem machines, where you can actually do a comparison and look at all of those aspects around a single platform. Well, now let's say that migration plan is great. You have looked at the cloud and on-prem costs, and you have ensured that you are making those potential savings. Now comes to the point when you have moved to cloud, right? I mean, now you have moved to cloud, whether maybe it is Azure, AWS, or GCP as an example. So how do you identify and avoid future problems before they happen? So we have continuous monitoring on cloud for our infrastructure as a service, and it also brings back all the data across all types of services around the cost. I mean, you can look at historical cloud spend, all service types, and all the spend around it. Look at day-to-day cloud costs. You can actually break in costs, look at business units, tenants, and also look at how you can actually identify overspend before it happens. So basically, you can get a clear visibility into IT cloud spend as well. Now, how about looking at reducing those costs? I mean, within the cloud manager space, we have a tool set called Optimizer, where you can actually identify, reclaim underutilized. That means on Azure or AWS or Google Cloud, if you have spin a machine, which is maybe, if you take an example of Azure, maybe it is a B2MS machine, and if you want, if you're spending too much there, and Foglight will come back and suggest you, maybe you need to reduce to the machine size like A2M or A1M as an example. So you can actually look at those kind of specifications and look at the VM resizing, or maybe there are potential zombies, or maybe there are unused resources that needs to be looked into, and reduce your cost and save up more. How about improving performance at the same time? Along with monitoring with all of those key components, we are continuously looking at how do you automate those systems in real time, understand performance levels, look at proactive improvement, and also at the same time optimize your systems. So it is just not about just collecting straight off the system, but also giving you suggestive remediation or automation workflows, so that you can look at the performance and look at the cost and look at various other aspects that it is actually linking into. Now, with that, I would also like to talk about a little bit around how does Foglight help you with infrastructure monitoring. With the infrastructure, the main goal is, how do you actually improve performance? Well, we have end-to-everything visualization, where you can actually monitor all the multi-hypervisor hybrid virtual environments. You may have multiple virtual centers, data centers, where you may have databases seated on virtual centers. You can interlink, you can look at performance levels, understand underperforming zombie machines, and also at the same time look at proactive improvement suggestions that you can actually help. At the same time, how do you resolve issues before they occur? I mean, there is a robust alarm system there, where you can actually investigate and look at what is actually happening on the CPU, diagnose the issue by going into further suggestive options there, resolve the issue before it impacts, look back in history by troubleshooting or by going back in time range, and also at the same time forecast those trends in order to fix those issues before they occur. As I mentioned in the earlier, we also have something called workflows, where you can actually look at a particular system workflow. You can actually say, okay, this particular machine needs to set some memory allocation, or maybe a CPU allocation. You can set those workflows and automate and fix issues accordingly. Maybe you need to change threshold of this particular alarm for this specific machine or the specific data center. So you can correlate those alarms and thresholds and make actionable steps so that it accelerates those VM performance now and in future. Now, with that, I'd also like to highlight some of the key benefits is how do you create service-based alarms, both interlinking the database and infrastructure. This is very, very important. In Foglight, it's out of the box. It is pre-built into the system. The screen that you're currently seeing, which is called Service Operations Console, by default, Foglight builds multiple models. But what you can do is you can create or bring in various systems into one particular module that can form as a group of collection of hosts that are particularly of your interest. You can track them as one single business unit, or you can track them as a one single data center. Now, these services can be as virtualizations or Hyper-V objects or database services or cloud and things like that. And then at the same time, you can actually build a proper service to define and look at the dependencies. I mean, the whole idea there is once you've created the module, it creates a dependency which tells you where the problem is. It could be related to VMware, or maybe it's related to data center, or maybe it is related to a particular cloud aspect. So things like that are quite nicely available within Foglight for you to build service models to keep up your service level agreements and making sure that your customers are happy, your teams are happy, your vendors are happy, and things like that. With that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce you to Foglight architecture. Foglight architecture is very, very simple. It suits to every organization. It can be a very large organization. It could be a very simple organization. We have modular designs. If you like to speak to us, just contact us and we can help you on those aspects. Especially, there are three main components in Foglight's architecture. One is the Foglight management server, which has its own database repository, which collects most of the monitoring metrics. And then the second component is the agent managers. The agent managers host agents. So basically, we have agents seated on these boxes. They collect all of the data remotely. So basically, it's pretty much agentless. So it can be an on-prem server, it can be in a hybrid environment, or it can be a cloud environment. We connect to those databases and bring the metrics back to the agent managers, and the agent manager sends the data back to the management server so that you can very comfortably look at the UI and analyze your data that it is collecting. So the main engine obviously is your management server, number one. Number two is your agent manager, which collects all of this. So in this particular diagram, I'll introduce you to another database that sits here, which connects to this from the agent manager to management server. This is the third component, which is called the SQL Performance Investigator, which does a lot of analytical stuff for your databases and database monitoring. So I'll leave this with you with a thought for you to think about how you can actually build your environments. And if you need further information, please do not hesitate to contact me. We can discuss more on the architecture because we have banking customers and things like that. Now, with that, I'd also like to introduce you to a key area, which is called Foglight Virtual Lab. This lab is available for you to look at this particular virtual lab environment that we have. It's got all different aspects. I mean, whether you need to go to cloud migration, cloud manager, or you want to explore SQL Server as an example. So please let us know. All you have to do is go to this particular link, register yourself, and you'll get access to the lab with your user credentials, and the details will be automatically sent to you, which will have access for you to dive into and spend some time learning about Foglight. So yeah, so I just wanted to bring this slide across so that you see we do have virtual labs where you can connect and see with your own hands and get an experience of the product before you test in your environment. Okay. Now, with that, one of the main things and the main questions that you need to ask yourself is, are you ready for tomorrow? Right? Are you ready for tomorrow? no matter what tomorrow brings in. I mean, this is very important for you to think from this presentation that you have spent almost 50 minutes of your time today. What does it actually look like when you're looking at products like Foglight for databases that will help your database teams? I mean, one of the key things that I'd like to mention again from the several data complexities that we talked about, the data silos we talked about the risks, and we talked about collaboration. So think about those key aspects. Well, I have a database team. Would it help me manage my systems, manage my capacity? If you have DevOps and you have regular CI/CD, you want to monitor your performance. How about looking at reporting? Does the cost and budget manage you? Does it help you reduce your compute costs, whether it is on VMware, cloud, or various different areas? How do you improve your application for your teams? I need to be looking at database tuning. Does it cover that aspect? And also at the same time, you want to make sure that the performance monitoring and diagnostics is available up in hand, and also you're solving your problems early on. For the senior management, that you should think and look at is today you may be looking at you're looking at control hybrid costs, or maybe you're looking at cloud spend, or sustaining the quality of service, dealing with skills gap. I mean, this is something quite essential for the senior management to think at from those aspects. These are those buzzwords that will help you to manage as an IT manager, or as an database head, or as a CIO. Would Foglight help me as an enterprise service, and would it help me to regulate my cloud spend or my IT infrastructure spend? Can I keep my service sustainable in those areas, and also can I keep those skills gap? So yes, I mean, Foglight for databases will help you in all of these aspects. Likewise, I'll bring you to the table, like, Foglight Evolve. Does it help you with hybrid infrastructure? Does it help my operation teams? Some of the key aspects to think around those areas is, especially for the IT teams, it's a regular kind of activity that we constantly do, whether it is virtualization, on-prem, physical machines, or cloud. We constantly look at the capacity management. We are very much worried about the storage capacity management. We are looking at how do we optimize those systems by remediation actions, looking at reporting. How do we look at VM compute and allocations into different regions, different data centers? At the same time, are we looking at the right size of those machines so that you're right sizing your VMwares, and also at the same time, you're having those performance monitoring. Again, some of the key benefits that will help the operation teams, for your help desk team, to your IT managers who are looking at how do you simplify your hybrid environment, how do you reduce your mean time, pay less but get more out of the systems, and at the same time validate your migrations. I mean, if you still have some on-prem legacy systems that you want to move them across, how do you quickly migrate them, and also at the same time find problems earlier on and resolve those issues, and have an efficient IT systems, and have an efficient database systems and infrastructure systems. So with this session, I mean, the goal is obviously, like, how can you actually simplify your IT systems, and how can you simplify your monitoring with Foglight? With that, what I'll do is I'll end my session. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, now is the time.
Thank you, Naushad, for your presentation. Very good. If anyone has any questions, you can put it on a chat, or in English or Portuguese, as we can translate it. We are also giving you the permission to unmute yourself if you want to talk. In the meantime, once again, thank you, Naushad. Thank you also, Paulina, for helping organizing this session. I think that we probably will have some doubts after when they have a closer when they have more time to have a closer look at the solution. So, but once again, thank you. Obrigado a todos os que estiveram presentes nesta sessão. Qualquer dúvida que tenham, podem entrar em contacto connosco. Nós também os podemos pôr em contacto com a Quest e podem esclarecer qualquer dúvida que tenham posteriormente.